Okay. I officially have a voice. New mic. Yay. So I hope my, I think my sound balancing is okay as far as like game versus voice, but please let me know if it is not. Basically what I did was just like kind of recording in OBS and then listening to it again after the fact. So, yay, cool. Yeah, it should be this, like, once I'm actually playing the game, it'll be the same volume, because this is the game sound. Because I just love the music from this, so figured this was a good intro song. Catch me trying to change my whole overlay to be Wadanohara themed. And be like, is this like just a exclusively Wadanohara streamer? I love this game and I love the aesthetic and so excited. I do hope this turns out like okay as far as being allowed to do it, that sort of thing, because I mean I can't imagine anybody's gonna like after me, but oh no, I don't think so. Kindred, you're good. I appreciate that. No, but I don't believe it's ever come up, so you're totally good. And it happens literally constantly. So, you know how it be. No worries there, but I appreciate that. I guess we will hop over and start the game. I don't know how long I don't really know how long to kind of like wait after you say you're gonna start. I've never really noticed how long it takes people to start up. I mean, I'm here, so. Then, okay. I don't think I started exactly at 8, but close enough. No. Also wondering about like, is the Venn diagram of people in Kodo's server and in Jelly's server just a circle? Should I post another promo link over there too? I don't know. It's funny to think about. Okay, that sounds good. Alrighty, well we will get started then. Let me just... Ta-da! My requisite spooky stinger. We love spooky. And my little bopping self. Ba-ba-ba. Yeah, okay. I can do that. I think I still have it on my clipboard. I sure do. Oh, the one disadvantage is that my keyboard definitely still picks up from this mic. I haven't gotten that worked out yet. Sorry about that. There, okay, I'm done typing. There we go. I think I posted this all over the darn place, so... Yeah, oh, I am such a fan of this keyboard. And this keyboard, I don't know if it picks up terribly well as far as, I'm making the streamer cardinal sin of, I have my mic on my desk, unfortunately, because I don't really have another option right now. So you won't be hearing the proper, reverb from my keyboard, because, you know, it would just be coming through the desk rather than actually being the clicks. But it's very nice. It's very nice. Once I get a proper, like, mic setup so it's not bonk, just the bass from the desk, I can, record my keyboard, and it's lovely. I'm very satisfied with it. It feels great to type, too. I'm so happy. Alright. Since it just nicely, ended our theme song right there, let's go ahead and get started. And again, let me know, because problem is the sounds for the game are very loud in my ear. So I'm so worried that I'm not loud enough. But I think I should be good, hopefully. But yeah, these headphones are very, just like naturally loud, I think. I don't know, let me see. Maybe I can turn the volume on the headphones down and that would Oh no, it's just the system volume. Oh well. Okay. Alrighty, here we go. Of course I knew. We felt the same way. Yeah? Okay. I would be fine with that. I would be so fine with that. Especially the water sounds. Okay. Smidge. It is smidged. Thank you. I'm a fool. Why? Why couldn't I notice something within my own self? It's too late. Much too late. For everything. It's my fault. All of it. Yep. All good. The, the, the messed up stuff happens, toward the end, and I will be updating the content warnings as we go. But the beginning is just very cute. Also, hi, Dolphin Burb. Welcome. I appreciate you checking my new little command. Thank you. If only I had done better. I'm sorry. And yet, now I can't even tell you that. Sorry. Our girl. Ta-da. I wish it had hung longer on that title screen. I want to tell you about the pun in the title, but... Wow! Welcome! This part is silent. It's not me. There's just silence right here. There she is. She's so cute. I am such a huge fan of Deep Sea Prisoners' art style. I love the little round people. I love them so much. Nice to meet you. I am the Sea Witch. And you are? Oh, is that right? I saw this guy. I've been waiting. Yes, I'm aware. Now, listen to this story I have to tell. As if swaying in the waves, lean back and listen. Ah, yes. The moon is full tonight. I always make a wish every night of a full moon. Yes, I believe in such things. Oh, I know, I'm just talking to myself. Never mind it. Lit by the moon, the sea seems to glitter just like the stars. Sea Witch? Oh, I don't know that. Is it like a book? I mean, is it similar to a book? I have to look that up. I'm down for that. Sea Witch is a good concept in general. Who knows what good can be found there. Also, welcome, Enzo-san. Is it similar? Yeah, is it is it printed words on a page, perhaps? Right. Now then, shall we begin? This is the story of a witch. So I don't think it's going to show the oh, book turn. I don't think it's going to show the title screen again. I really like the title screen. Deep Sea Prisoner, yeah, we love you. It may show the title screen, I don't remember. But it's really cool because the kanji, the characters for Wadanohara, and the kanji for characters, the Great Blue Sea, the Onobara, is the same. So they're just pronounced differently, but it's like basically like Big Blue Sea and Big Blue Sea is the name of the game. But it just happens to be her name. Oh, there we go. Yeah. It's stylized in the second one there, but they're the same characters, so it's fun. Fun sort of deal there. My dear girl, please, always remain who you are. Let nothing stain you, nothing take you away. Oh man, if I'd thought about it, I should have an echo effect on this part. Oh, I don't want to interrupt things to do that. Wait. It's not going to be that hard. Let me see. I wonder if I can do that. Hang on. I actually don't know what would be good. XLR, huh? Oh, is that the like the fancy mic? I mean, I've got a decent mic. It's a nice mic. Oh, where's the oh, there they are. Okay, what if it's the sound mixer? Oh, okay. All this culture is so weird. Do this. Okay. Weird. I can't hear it. I should have done this beforehand. Didn't think about it. All right. Anyway, that is all I ask of you. A baby. Sleepy. Oops. Slept a little late, huh? Sleepy. We're gonna put our clothes on. Yay, clothes. Second, putting something aside. There we go. There. Guess everyone's outside? Yep. Yeah. We're very cute. Oh, and we're no longer CP. Baby. Again, I apologize. You most likely can hear my keyboard. We're gonna work on that going forward, but right now you just get to hear clicks. What a magical candy! Yay! Coffee with copious amounts of milk. Correct. Oh yeah, I meant to mention that. The remastered version hasn't yet been translated, and I do not think I have the mental capacity to translate and also stream and also play and also I'm brain smooth. So this is still the original version? Yeah, yeah, I know. I should, but that'll be later. I don't want to reveal to everybody how much of Japanese that I have forgotten over the years. Morning, Wada. Now you slept well, huh? Gosh, how many times you wake me up? sorry. You're one late sleeping witch. Go see the others. Right. Memoka. Oh, should I tell him? Should I? I don't know. Hang on. Okay, so Memoka. Oh, what Memoka? It's, her name is backwards. It's Kamome. What? it's Kamome is seagull, and Memoka is her name. So it's like a little it's a pun. It's another pun. Thank you for following. Welcome. Hey. Got to make the kitty purr. I hope that was audible. I didn't think about the alerts. And also my voice, and also the game. I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you? Very excited to play my favorite, well, one of my favoriteest games with you guys. Hey, how's it going? Oh boy, what's that? Morning, Wadanohara. Morning, Delphi. Delphi's, I think, pretty obvious as far as why her pun in her name is that she's a dolphin. Oh, fair enough. That is good. Good realization. What's up? There's lots of sharks over there. Sharks are scary. Dolphy is absolute baby. It's okay, Dolphy. Not scary at all. Really? Yeah, trust me. Yes, no, Dolphy is completely baby, and we love. Hey, morning, Wadanohara. Oh, thank you. I have no claims to being actually any good at voice acting, but I do enjoy the I do enjoy it. So this is Fukami. Yeah. We love Fukami. Everybody is excellent. Everybody in this game is really good. I'm just saying. Flattery will get you everywhere. Fukami. Had a good sleep, I take it. Yeah, I kind of conked out. The requisite greeting for Kono. Everybody has to go. Hi, Kono. I'm doing well. We're playing my favorite. Well, okay, I keep saying that. And then I'm gonna lie to you when I eventually play Final Fantasy VIII, and then I'll be like, "This is my favorite game." Hi, I'm doing well. How are you? Yay! Yes, that is completely valid. Yes, that is correct. Okay, yeah, that is true. That is true. I do love RPG Maker games. It's just RPG Maker, period. Yeah, that is true. That is my favorite RPG Maker game. That is very true. Thank you. Tired from the long journey. Don't push it. I'm fine. Doubt? Oh, yeah. Also correct. Also a very accurate, a very, very correct opinion. Ugh, how much further is it gonna be? Looks so short. Oh. Babies. They're all babies. Hello. My name is Wadanohara. I'm a witch. Right now, I'm traveling with my familiars to return to my home sea. That's fair. You aged and she did not. Must leave her behind. All right, better get moving. Oh, hell yeah. Oh, hell yeah. Boat time. Doot, 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 doot. Water sounds. I love the little sprites for the fish are in little lifesavers or little life rafts. Hello, excuse me. You have to like actually click on them to. Oh, that is true. Yeah. That they're like sitting in the little life rafts, and also you have to like deliberately interact with them in order to battle them. They don't just attack you. You have to deliberately be mean. We're just gonna do effectively auto battle here. And also I know that ding is it's pretty dingy. So if I do need to turn the game sounds down overall just to account for that freaking ding. What? Auto mod, please. You're completely valid. Auto mod. That's really good. I like that. I like that it caught that. That's hilarious. Hello. There's really no, like... The grinding is really not necessary. This is very much a story-oriented, game, so I think my first playthrough I was, like, way, way, way OP. Because I was like, oh, RPG, I have to grind! But no. This is not, the battles are not the point for the most part. Yay, level 2! Slightly less baby. Yeah, well, okay, depending on how you play it, I guess. Ding, ding, dong, ding, dong. Yes, correct. Now we are like a toddler. No, but I do have several friends who go way hard. I do not. I want the cute ones, and that's about it. My strategy for Pokemon is, you could fight me and win, but at what cost? Makes cute faces at you. Heck, dude. We sure did. This is... We're not fighting this guy. This is Deep Sea Prisoners, like, artist insert. That's what they look like. That's what they look like. Nah. No! What's floating there? A ladder? Maybe postman? Indeed. Which means perhaps he may have crashed somewhere again. The letter C for C. That's not good. A star. We can't pick these up. They're just here. Oh, not again. Listen, buddy. Yay. Another one. Is he on that island? Star Island, because of all the stars. Star Isle. Imagine. A letter. 2 letters. A letter. Several letters. Are you okay? I'm hungry. Oh, not this again. He's been too busy with work to eat, surely. Done for. I'm a goner. Wadanohara, do you like roast fowl? No, thanks. Hold up! Is that not a proclamation of war against me? What? Star fruits. Gotta be. Star fruits. Huh? Hey, I got donuts on me, so take them and put up with it. I want star fruits. Why? Any food should be fine, right? Am I right? He's got a halo. He's dead. He's dead, Jim. Well, star fruits grow elsewhere on the island, so we could go get some. What? Just leave the layabout. He should get it himself. He's dying. You can just let him fucking die. Birds of a feather are harsh on each other. Star fruits. Oh, look, he looks so pained. Let's go fetch some. If that's what you want, fine. Yeah. Not approving. He's dead. He's dying. I do think there's something over here. Yeah. Candy shields. So now we have equipment. And the only shield we will ever need for the rest of the game, per me. Candy shield, correct. No, right? Oh yeah, wait. There's A very ordinary candy shield. I forgot there's descriptions. Mammoka has a knife. What do you have? A knife! No! Mirror sword. Smaktopus hammer. Fukami is scary. I know, right? I don't think there's anything else this way. I don't remember. Oh, hey, I was wrong. I'm glad I checked. Greed will get you everywhere. Candy swords. Oh, I forgot. What? Why didn't you have your... Alright. 34, better. Sorry, everybody. You have to take your favorite item away. You now have to use this. Because I say so. Candy meth. Okay, there we go. Again, I apologize for keyboard sounds. I'm trying to minimize them because these keys don't have to be pressed super hard, so... But I do know that my keyboard is... Like, my mic is on the desk as the keyboard, so... Alas. Yes, precisely. A key! We love keys. They're shiny. What do you do with it? Don't know. It's shiny. Warning! Eating too many star fruits will induce hallucinations. Do not eat more than 10 a day. Now we understand why he wants exclusively star fruits and not donuts. Here we go, the star fruits. So pretty. What does that sign say? I can't read. Let's get them back to him quickly. Oh, what the? Ain't giving you the star fruit. These are ours, see? What's that? They're not anybody's, right? Ain't yours. What? These guys need a beating. Wadanohara. We can have a roast fowl feast. Roast fowl. Is that tasty? It's not bad. Hurry up! Smash them! Hold on, everyone! Administer beating? Why don't you may be the only voice of peace here? But look how cute they are! And this battle music is really good. Just gonna auto battle because they'll, you know, go to the next target, so it's fine. No, Dolphy! How dare you! Is it good? Is it good? I know, right? Hi, welcome, Daff. I'm in break. Hi. Oh, yay. Yay! Yeah, beat the head. Yeah, honestly. There is no, there is no chill. There's no chill. Ah. And they cease to exist. You're hungry, right, Wadanohara? Take this. Great. Hey, Fukami. Hey, Fukami. Just a question. How did you roast that quickly? Thanks, Fukami. Jeez, I'm fed up with all these guys. Wadanohara, the star fruit. I know. I'm like, oh wait, no, I can't do it justice. So, story for folks in the chat that are not my mods is, my not my first playthrough, but I shared this with, I shared this with, our server, like the, just like friend server, friend group, whatever, and we were all playing this together. We were all doing the voice acting together. So I'm like, like low-key sometimes I'm just imitating their impressions of the characters. I'm just, I'm a fraud. Oh, yeah, right. Let's hurry and bring this starfruit. Breakers was the one that did, I know, right? It was a lot of fun. It was a ton of fun. We get to do very silly voices, and Break sounded very hot as Fikami is very good. We can do it over Discord. Starfwoot! Yes, well. You had the, Oh, yes! Oh, man. Yeah, I can do that, Butters. Yeah. That's what I was thinking. You alright? We got the star fruits. Please eat up. Hmm? Hmm? Hmm. 1 second, I am hydrating. Okay. See, I'm remembering Mega's voice from this guy. I'm just tempted to do that. Ha ha! Well, the gang's all here. Long time no see. Ha ha ha! Oh, what lifesavers you are. Are you okay, Mr. Nekoyama? Never been better, thanks to you. Oh yeah, when like for VTubers, like it always looks really funny when they're drinking, so they're usually just like holding their mouth open because there's nothing in front of their face. It's fun. Plum forgot to get a bite to eat with all the work I'm doing. Guess I do have a bit of a bird brain after all. This guy. Hi, sorry for the trouble, Ms. Wadanohara. It's fine. I'm just glad it didn't get, serious. Roast fowl. Huh? The fuck was that? Nothing. Oh, it was terribly rude of me to stop you on your return trip. Sudaro! Fire goes by! I'm a cat. I gotta drink out of the faucet. Hello, welcome. I noticed you followed. Thank you. I'll have to make amends for this sometime. No, it's fine. Bird meat. Good meat, then. Forgot me! Well, now, I've still got loads of work on the pile, so if you'll excuse me. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for joining. Okay. Oh, hope he'll be okay. Just fell. I love that it even makes the Neum sound. Stupid bird. We should be going as well. I'm not doing the Fikami voice very well. No, you want, but yeah. No, please let me walk around with everybody following me like little ducks. Oh, let's see. I'm a huge fan of little RPG Maker horror games like these. I do have several of these on the back burner that I can absolutely go to. There's several little indie horror creators that okay, so I guess I can already answer that. Mostly indie horror. There's several indie horror creators that I'm following on itch. Oh, good. Oh, yeah, totes. I freaking love RPG horror. RPG Maker horror. Yes. I'm not familiar with that one. I'll have to check that out. Oh, that, and I want to play, Phasmo. I don't own it yet. I've never played. But I've been watching, my friend play it, and they're just kind of like a gleeful little careless goblin, and I want to enjoy getting murdered by ghosts with them. Yeah, I'm not familiar with Stories Untold. That's cool. Game's good. Yay, we won. What? Oh, come on. I didn't think I had... Oh, you got it? Thank you. I didn't think I had... I totally don't have, swears turned off. You guys are more than welcome to swear. Lord knows I'm gonna. So, you're good. Yeah, see, that worked! Oh, I guess because it's, like, gendered. Fair enough. I don't want no fucking gender in here. Get that shit out of here. Is that a cross? So these little, like, little markers, like, on the stars came up, like... They always just, like, come up for... Nah. Wait. Yeah, no, you have to. There's a coat check. In the doorway, there's a coat check for your gender. You can just drop it off when you come in. Or if you want, you can pick up some extras. Who knows, you know. It's gender reveal parties. Lord knows that's a booming industry. I'm so proud of that one. Please, are you panicking at the disco in my chat? Is that what's happening right now? No panic in the Twitch chat. I feel so bad for these little guys. Look how cute they are. I'm just bullying them. I feel so bad. Panic at the box. Yeah. Wait, no, don't panic. Wait, no, wait. The sea papers are the size of the box. I know, you know, that's what I was saying earlier, Sajaro, like, no, that's what I was saying earlier, Sajaro, like, the first time I played this, I was like, oh, I gotta grind, like, I'm coming at it from, like, the Final Fantasy, perspective. Water and water. Thank you. Water and water and water. Butter's never listened to that. Still gonna think I'm a crazy person. Just randomly singing that. Oh, you play your numbers. I love numbers. Weather's good. Should be able to get back just fine. Thank goodness. I can't remember who's saying this. Oh, wait, I think I do. Hey! I'm just gonna make a random voice because I don't remember, but I'm pretty sure I know. Try to remember how Metal did it. Wadanohara! Yep, I was right. Okay. Oh, meltdown. Yeah. To con them. Hey, finger guns. Oh, nice. Yeah. Oh. Wow. Oh, wait. Forgot my voices. Wow. Pitch Black Witch. Flamaki. The super deep voice. Oh, finally caught up to you. Gosh, the city's way too big. Oh. Who did, yeah! Tiny friend. Oh, this needs to be a tiny voice. What about too? Oh, and Lobco. I can't remember who's Lobco. Was it? No, I don't think it was Mega. I forget who did Lobco's voice and what they did. The sea's surface is so dreary. I was getting bored on my broom. Is that right? I don't... I feel so bad. Lobco is like that's her thing, is that she's been forgotten, and oh no, I feel so bad now. Klomaki, why are you here? Well, I just thought the occasional flight overseas might be nice.
Lady Klamaki, that's not true. You have a delivery, right? Oh, right you are, Loco.
I'm trying to give her like a nasally voice because she's a cat. You can't really tell, but she has cat ears. So. Oh no! Just lick them.
Wadanohara, you forgot something. Huh?
Rasputin, please. Gems. You're tag teaming.
Here, it's your ocarina. Oh, oh, oh! Very important, am I right?
Yes. How could I have forgotten this?
Clumsy Wada.
Yeah. Hey, you remember the in 2020 you have to wear this, 2021 you have to wear this. Wear it where? Come on. Tapping my watch. Yes. Yeah, Break had a great time voice acting Ukami and like barely saying anything. Aww. Oh yeah, that was really good. I very much appreciated that voice. Felt like I was missing something, but I think I'd forgotten something this important.
Okay, thank you very much for joining in. Have a good night. It happens. First time going there, wasn't it? Must have been all nerves. All nerves.
Yes. Did you really just come out here just to give me this?
Yep.
Sorry. Hydrating. Oh, Maggie, thank you so much.
No prob. Wanted to fly around here anyway. I was scared I'd fall out of her head.
Oh, it's fine.
It is not.
Jeez, what a nagging familiar you are. Maybe you should learn from Wadanohara's, yeah?
A bird, an octopus, and...
Maki and Delphi just staring at each other.
A shark?
She's so baby.
Ah, you made Delph cry. Sorry. Little monkey. Sharks and dolphins are completely different. Pretty similar if you ask me. No, they're not. All right. I'm sorry. I mean, come on now.
They all look the same to me. Jesus Christ. Bam.
Lady Klamaki, dolphins aren't fish.
The Paul Sanders.
What's up, Wadanohara?
Oh, it's nothing.
Maki, thank you so much again. It's fine, seriously. Maybe I'll come with you while I'm at it. I can go home.
Blush you lines. I die.
Well, I've got minor business, so maybe that'll have to wait. Well, excuse me for now. See you later, Wadanohara. Yes.
Knife guy video when?
Not a shark. God. Scary. Dolph, Not all sharks are like that one.
That shark.
Yeah, that shark is a special case.
Wadanohara. Is that really so important to you even now?
Of course.
Shark. Oh, I'm so glad you're getting to see this after you already know now, Butters. Let's speed up one vertical shark. Cosmos. No! Don't eat the sharks! Don't eat anybody! No eating! There's no vor! There's no voring! Good lord. Okay, let's speed up more vertical sharks. I can show off the spells, but for these guys, we really don't need to. We're just bullying them. Oh, excuse me. Oh, you're approaching me? The seafood. Oh, break. Please do tell me what the seafood. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, they are. They're just minding their own business. But I need the XP. I need it. I need the strength in the coming days. And maybe these life preservers. Wax. Thanks. Yeah. Yeah, they're just vibing. It's just like, oh god. Oh, yeah. Hey, I'm a healer who was a bat. Full heal for 10G. Well, I don't remember that being there, but okay. I very well remember Mega's voice for those. Wadanohara. Pretty sure that's who this is. Yeah, it was really good. A shark! Fuck! It's almost like we were just talking about sharks, and one shark in particular. Oh, I cannot compare to Robo's voice. Oh, I can't. It was so good. I will try to imitate, but I will be a shallow impression.
By the way, Lady Klamaki. What? Is that ocarina truly so important to Wadanohara? Oh, yep.
That is true.
Present from the shark, it seems like. You mean Samikichi? Yep.
He has a name. And then you present him and he looks like that. I know, right? Oh no. We streamed this like in Discord chat like in the server, and we all just did like a bunch of different voices. So yes, God, I love this man. And our friend Robo had a particularly good voice that they did for Samakichi, and I'm no! Don't call him that. Oh no! I was providing context. You're good. I appreciate the encouragement. What? Why? Why are you?
Samikichi. Hey, Samikichi.
Why? Why did you come back? I know, right? Listen. Listen. I am consistent in my brand. You think, oh, this cute little C-based RPG Maker game, that'll have nothing in common with Final Fantasy VIII. Why on earth does bits like both of these games? No reason. No reason at all.
What are you saying? This sea is Wada's home.
Shut up.
What?
Shut the fuck up. It's goddamn true. Fuck. Wait. What's the other half? Is the other half the Protoman? I don't know. I'm being doxxed. Help. What? What's the other half? Phantom of the Opera? Those were the same age. Do you know how long I spent playing FF8 while listening to Phantom of the Opera? Like, Jesus Christ. Clearly, I've never aged past 12. Wadanohara. You shouldn't be here. Leave this sea right now.
What? What's this nonsense? Get a grip, Shark Boy.
You're just impediments as far as I'm concerned. Because Wadanohara's presence would foil you again, I assume. I gotta make sure I differentiate the two dudes here. Hydrating. Apologies.
Scary Shark. Shark. You get out of here.
Wadanohara. I'll say it again. Yeah. It's a competition. Leave right now.
Why?
I told you, you can't be here. Don't make me say it again.
Samikichi.
You aren't gonna listen? Then what? No, honey, wait. Pause. Samikichi. I can't make me say that. Please. Yeah. My entire chat. Oh, 4? To devour you.
Oh, I'm pissed now. Let's lay the smackdown. Like scary sharks.
Yeah. I came here for this nice sea game. It definitely isn't fucked up in the slightest. Strangle you first.
Hold on, guys.
Perfect. Bring it on.
Baby.
I know that's not the reaction I'm supposed to be having, but look at those. Oh, I'm gonna squish your cheeks. Okay, so this is the first. Oh yeah, he has a tune. This is the first time I am gonna be a little disappointed that we're not playing the remastered version, because apparently one of the changes that is made is Wadanohara refuses to fight Samikichi. And it makes me very happy. So we're gonna do it like that, and we're gonna manually make that a little detail there. Yeah. Like I don't think she shows up in the list, is how they do it into the game function.
Sorry, Samakichi.
Oh, great. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
Grr.
She just pouts at you. What? Pardon? Oh.
Dummy, now buzz off. Buzz off.
Stubborn one. Shall I hurt you more?
Wait, stop, guys.
Jesus Christ.
Jeez, what's the holdup, Wada? I mean, Samikichi, he's...
Still so naive.
Uh,
Which is exactly why you shouldn't be in the sea.
why? Samikichi.
Well, you better be gone some way or another. Because I'm fucking outie.
Wada, don't tell me you still... Ugh, you're hopeless. That guy is so...
Look at my stitches. That response to these fucking... Nope, I'm out. I got bapped. Everyone is sad. Wadanohara. He's a traitor. He's cute. You know that too, don't you?
We'll be there soon. Come on, everybody.
Wada convinces no one.
They were away. And now she's going home.
A nurse shark. Yeah, no, they don't do any... They're not, because there's a different creature that is a healer later, and it's also not a nurse shark. I'm sorry to disappoint you.
Hey. Wow.
On no! No, there's a cute shark. It's fine. To be fair, it might be funny in Japanese. I'm not actually sure.
Sparkles time.
I don't remember what it is in Japanese.
Yay. Thingy. It's so pretty.
Yeah, see, Sojaro, the reboot version of this, they like remastered. Oh, what? Oh, man. Oh, sweet. Oh, great. I'm so glad. Yeah, the remaster of this is, or they did like a reboot, like literally last year. But it is not been translated yet. So, what the fuck is that? Oh yeah, I gotta get BTTV set up. I haven't done that yet. I'm not sure how. Like, I have it available, but on like on my browser, but I gotta figure out how to put it into how to let you guys do it so it shows up on my screen. Oh, Wadanohara, welcome back. Wadanohara, welcome back. Continue through the gate. I don't know. I'm just doing stupid voices now.
Yay, Sea Kingdom. It is Sea Kingdom time. Oh, there they go. Finally made it. Yeah, really feels like I'm home. Oh, and relax now. Relax? Don't know about that. Still might see Shark Boy. Oh no. Hey, Mimoka.
No, I think it's a pufferfish. If I remember correctly. I don't remember though.
Wada.
Go King, give us nothing.
All right, let's go home to the Sea Kingdom. Ah. So nice. Here we go. Book page.
They're so cute. And now we see that Fukami is 1, fucking tall, and 2, an octopus. Dolphins too. I absolutely the biggest brain character design to make them effectively cat boys, or cat folk, but sea creatures. Absolutely huge brain. And I love her little walk animation. Doot 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 doot. Doot 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 doot. Doot doot. Sparkles time. This is how you get to my house, is a road of sparkles.
Making my way downtown. Hello. Oh, it's Wadanohara.
You should get there eventually.
Umo. Welcome back, Wadanohara. It's your trip. Ah.
Aw.
It was fine, thanks. Went a little longer than expected. It's fine. She's pretty leisurely herself.
As you, Floaty.
How was it over there? This is stimulating.
Yeah, lots of personality there.
That's nice. I've never left the sea myself.
You are a jellyfish, so... how's the kingdom?
Probably heard stories, but we're fine now.
I know, I love her.
That's good. Oh, the state of affairs doesn't look too good.
That motherfucker on the music box. It's killing it.
Which one is it?
Oh. Which one is it? Is it either fine or is it not? That was, I misunderstood.
I'll be going to the castle to tell them you're here. I'll call for you later, I'm sure. Relax in town until then.
Understood.
I'll be going then.
How'd you do that?
She's gone.
She really is, floaty, huh? Naturally. Being a jellyfish. I actually think we don't have to... Yeah, we don't have to stick to the sparkles. You do if you want to get through the door, though. We can just, like... Bye. Hey, how'd you do that? You went backwards for a second there. I saw... Oh! Oh, it stopped! Yeah, no, Sparkle Road pretty.
See, we're getting deeper into the Sea Kingdom. It's getting dark.
Oh, here it is. Hey, I'm a healer. Full heal for 10G. Well. Okay, good. That's how you get all the good folks to come. All the cool kids.
Hello. Thank you for following. Welcome. Hey. I see the town. Yes, finally here. I'm hungry. I'll make something when we get home.
Go King, give us nothing.
Hello. Welcome. What is it, Fukami?
Use your words. Seems we have another nuisance.
Huh?
There's dots from somewhere. Never. Oh, hey. You again. Didn't you listen to me? Oh, Samikichi. How the hell did you get down here so fast?
There he is.
This is the same nuisance, yeah. Maybe we don't want to listen to the likes of you.
Scary shark.
He was hanging off the rocks. He was just like, bye.
Samikichi.
Wadanohara, if you insist on being here in this sea.
Thank you. I have credits down in the bottom. My avatar was a little gift commissioned by Percy, also known as Made a Saint. Thank you. I appreciate it. Pop, 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 pop. How are you doing?
What nuisance? It's the same. It's just the one.
Hey.
I'll have to force you out.
Samikichi, stop it. Why would you say that?
Quiet. There's nothing I can say to you. Then why do you keep... But... Conversations are not his strong point.
This shark's nuts. What are you saying, Wana?
Literally, what? What are you saying? Please, what are you saying? Insulting my master, are you? Can't forgive that.
Scary sharks. Wait. Hold on now. Wait.
Bring it on. Again.
I like his song.
All right, so once again, we're going to replicate the reboot version in which she does not fight. So what? All right, fair enough. Don't throw pottery at him. You.
What?
Doot. Strangle his ass. Oh, her little... I love their little pop-ups. I think Memoka mostly deals in like kind of status effects. What? I think I need to do that one again. Dolphy is a glass cannon. And Fukami is just a goat. He's just fucking beast. I mean, like, his insane amount of... Look at how friggin' much health he has. Da 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 da. There's no music. Gotta do something. Pathetic. We got the pathetic! We got one! Listen, I hope you can tell that's who I'm trying to channel for the Fukami voice here. I hope that's obvious.
Pathetic shark! Dummy shark! Dummy shark. Guys, stop it, I said.
Damn it.
Samikichi.
Wadanohara, you're nothing but an impediment to me. He's got one line. He's got like 2 lines. I'm leaving again. Oh, hell yeah. Yeah, gosh, the weather was freaking amazing today over here. I don't know. I'm glad it was the same for you. It's awesome. It's nice to get out and just like,
I'm fancy now.
that's good. Shut up, Sajar. Shut up. Shut up. All right, new band board.
Who's that? He really grates on me.
Guys, you should stop being so cruel.
Wada, we're doing it for you, you know.
But why did that bullying? No, you're fine. What the hell? Sorry for Automod. I'm gonna have to swap. I'm gonna change that. And also, yes, most likely. Wadanohara. You're surely tired. Let's return home.
Yeah.
And everyone was sad again. Oh, those are really cute emojis. We're going ham with the music box. Gotta pay the bills with this music box. It's very cute, though. I'm not ragging on it at all.
Here we are. Deep Sea Town.
Nice. They're very cute. I've never heard of them, but I need to check them out. That's cool.
Here we are. Ah, Deep Sea Town. It has been too long. Tummy rumbling. Right. Let's get home, shall we?
Right.
Okay. Rumble. Sophia's baby.
Atlantis. Yes, we did. Here we are in Atlantis, where we live. Go King, give us nothing. Kicked my ass twice. Atlanta! Wait. What should I do? Not get your ass kicked? Timing. Wrong turn. Try communicating. Oh, that's so cute. And a very good application. Leave it all. This is bad. Just talking to himself in a void. Don't. Oh. Whatever it takes. I have to. What should I do? Try being normal. Never. Ever.
Munch, 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 munch. Tastes good? Yeah. Stuff. Good job, everyone. Good job, me.
Sophie is so baby.
Good on Nemoka.
You should rest yourself. Ask him to. Hey, shut up.
Well, I thought I'd go say hi to everyone first. Hi? Wada, that can wait for later. You gotta eat first.
Yes, you should rest.
Oh, I'm fine, guys. Really? Yeah.
Face. Oh, those are great. It's blanky mode.
Take it easy, everyone. Munch, 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 munch. Now I'm free.
Don't push yourself too far. Excuse me. I must talk to my friends.
Geez, so serious, Wada.
Munch, 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 munch. Thank you, Dolphy. I'm really glad.
A painting of Wadanohara's father.
Of Haku? Yeah! Oh, yeah! You think about that. Same, like, hair.
Alright. I guess I'll take a look around town.
Wadanohara's house. You had a sign made? Stare. Thanks.
Wadanohara, cute as usual.
I don't know if I'm gonna be able to come up with enough random voices that don't already sound like somebody else. I want to be a ninja, okay. Grab! Heck, dude! Crab, crab! Crab, crab, crab! Crab, crab. Crab, 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 crab. No, no, wait. We want to go over here. A green one.
I always fell asleep when I read.
This is we're having a gathering? Wait, we are having a gathering! This is... Aw, they're doing exercises! Oh, I don't think. Deep Sea Prisoner, the person who made this game, also made Mogeko, which I know probably has a pretty bad name, but it's fine. Like, I played it and it was like, you know, obviously very questionable at the beginning, but like it's not presented in a way that like it's okay, like it's not. So, and then it, like, the rest of the game like never made any sort of mention to any questionable content. Pretty much they gave up on that really quick. Yes! Yeah, second half only run, yeah. So yeah, and the Mogekos are really cute. They're basically like little fucked up cats. Like, they're just, yeah, they're very cute. It's fine. Wait, Parrish, wait, that's a bad stretch. I don't like that stretch. The Raw Hamsons. Okay. Super cool band. He knows some like little quotable bits, but no. I did not like watch it myself. Is it related? Oh! Yeah. Oh, isn't that? Oh no, that's not the same thing as Catbug, right? I can't remember. Is that Catbug? I know Catbug. Radio DJ in the meantime. Hey, just listen. Crab! Should I work out too?
They're doing stretches. Chan. Okay. I thank you for joining such out of...
Oh, yeah. Okay. Bravest Warriors. Okay, yeah. Stretch your arms. Oh, no. We're doing radio exercises. You're so cute. You're so pretty. No, wait, come back.
I'm getting sleepy.
Let's see. Oh, well, this seems important. Let's go to the place with the red arrow.
Huh? She's snapping?
Sure looks like it, Wada. Okay, night-night. Oh, there you are. I know, right? You just walk to this person's house, and they're just fucking sleeping, and you're like, oh, that's awkward. Like, nah, brah. It's my freaking house.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I wake you up? Oh, Wadanohara.
I think this one was one that Benj did. Very soft, sweet voice. The crab. Oh no. Oh no. Well, you know, crabs like to be in small spaces. Maybe.
When'd you get back? Just now.
Yeah.
Oh, welcome back. I'm glad. It must have been such a long way. Thanks. I thought you might never come back.
I don't know enough about crabs.
Well, I would. Just like my little sister. Oh, that's right. Your sister is still abroad? That she is. Sheesh. Just vanishes on me one day. Well, at least I know she's okay from her periodic letters. Right. Don't be a bad girl and go vanishing, will you, Wadanohara? Okay. Anyway, knowing you made it back safely, now I can nap in peace. Want to sleep with me?
Literally, not. Don't. No. It's not anything weird.
No, that's fine. Oh? As when we sleep together, you always squeeze me.
That sounds like a perfectly good thing. What's wrong with that? I want to be squished.
Letters! Oh, I know what this character looks like, but I can't remember the vibes. Dear Big Sis, how are you? I'm great. I'm off to study on the land. Sorry this was so sudden. Every day's so exciting because a lot's different from the sea. I don't think I'll be back for a while. But don't worry about me. I've got someone very kind caring for me. Don't nap too much, sister. Anyway, that's just all they like. Little letters. Squish, squish, squish. Yes! Ooh, you're cool. Oh, we've already been that way. Let's see. Any other doors have red arrows over them? Oh yeah, the shop. This. Yeah. Why is there a pepper? Okay, I can't investigate the pepper. Hey, go. I have lots of those. Can kind of hurt if thrown. Probably need like one of these. Maybe one of those. A couple of those. And I don't, that's expensive. Yeah! I love all the little creatures. They've done such a good job. Think we have decency stuff. It won't tell me how much they're the map. It won't tell me how much they are oh, I guess. Okay, so it does show that it's a better. Red is usually worse. But it's an up arrow, so maybe. Either way, we don't have enough to do that, so no. Spend all my money on food. Ooh, a wiggly boy. Why is our princess so quiet anyway? Oh, I guess we're not going this way. Why would the kingdom come to attack us? Pardon? What? That sounds important. What? Alm's house. Hello. It was good. I got a new mic. That's what you're hearing. And I got it all set up, and I think it sounds okay. From what I looked in the recordings. So yeah, had a nice day. It's lovely outside. Thank you for asking. I love Melita's little wings. Very cute. Yay, thank you. Yay. Oh, Wadanohara. No, have you been well? I see. Welcome back. Must have been a long trip. Thanks. But it was a great experience, especially for the future. Yay, thank you. It's just a Blue Yeti, which is apparently like what everybody and their mother uses, but good lord, it's such an improvement over what I had. Ah, that's good. Yeah. I'm deaf. You rest now. Don't overdo it. Gosh, I've got everyone worrying about me. I'm fine. Well, you're really still a kid, so of course we worry. Oh, that's not true, is it? A little taller. I meant in your heart. Huh? There's good aspects to that too, though. Is that a compliment, or... You got a baby heart. Baby heart. Ha. Little baby heart. Of course. Jeez. Oh, that's right. Lopko should be coming home too. Oh, really? I was worried for her. It seems she's been having fun, though. Well. What? Well, Lopko's a bit on the slow side, same as you. What? But I'm glad to know you're both fine. I said I was. I wonder. Hi. Thank you for lurk. No problem. Thank you. Ah, jeez. No, you. I'm the Uno reverse card. No. I appreciate your lurking.
Thank you for all the backhanded compliments. I'm gonna go now. Feel worse about myself. Thanks. Let's see. I'm trying to think of who else we need to visit. We came this way. Let's go this way. Aha. Tadako's house. Wait. Oh. I can't. Yeah. No, it's Tadako. I can't do it like Butters does it. Oh, it's such a cute little voice. Long time no see, Tadako. Yep.
Was it okay? Did you get in any accidents on the trip?
No, it was fine.
Oh, I was worried. I was spitting a lot of ink while you weren't around.
Great.
Oh, no. How about I do that now?
I sound like fucking Elmo. This is not a good voice. Your voice. Oh, it's like I can't. I can't remember. I can hear the voice that you did, and yeah, he's red. Oh no. Okay. I gotta come up with a cuter voice.
I love the Yoshi voice.
I don't know. I'll pass.
Really? Maybe later.
Right.
Yoshi.
I don't know if I can consistently like make words with that. No.
We're not gonna do Yoshi voice.
I don't think I can. Yeah, I don't think I can make words with that.
Oh yeah, earlier I saw Tenkichi. Oh, I mean Samakichi outside town.
Huh? Yes, so did we. Oh, thank you. Okay, all right, we have a vote. Butters is trying to embarrass me. Butters is not motivated by what sounds good. In fact, the opposite.
Seemed really fidgety, but oh, I see. Maybe it was because you're back.
Oh, I see.
Wadanohara, why the sad face?
Well, I met him earlier too, but he told me to leave. I am cringe, but I am free.
He's just shy and won't admit it. Samakichi's so difficult.
Mickey, I don't know if I can do a good Mickey voice. Oh boy, that's all I can say with Mickey. You think so?
Yes, I do. I proclaim so.
Huh.
It is so. Tadako said.
Did somebody mention the door? Are you gonna talk about a door?
Who said?
So Tadako even speaks in third person. It's Elmo. It's just Elmo now. Elmo of the sea. Yes. I'm cringe, but I'm free. Absolutely. Thanks, Tadako. That makes me feel a little better.
That's good. Because you're my friend, Wadanohara.
Yeah.
I'll give you my proof of friendship. The Octo Kiss. Octo.
I might pass on that too.
Oh, too bad. Why does nobody seem to like Octo Kiss?
And your subcon, yeah. Break can read your mind, so jot that down.
Hey, Wadanohara? Me next time you're bored, okay?
Hey, I'd love to. Okay, next I'll visit Coral Sea. I don't know where that is. Oh, right, really tall building. Excuse me, pardon me, excuse me. This building is so tall. Who gave you the right? Is the Coral Sea this way? Yes, it is. Yay. Oh, that's so cute. Oh, that pumpkin mask is really cute. That's peak fashion. That's very cute. Did they have it like at a jaunty angle on their head, I hope? That is the correct way to wear that.
All right, now to check on.
I just smack.
Huh?
I don't remember who's saying this.
Sorry about that. Wasn't looking. Huh?
Let's slap it.
Oh, I forgot who you are. Oh, yeah. Okay. Oh, huh. Man, if it isn't Wadanohara. Oh, Muna.
Sideways. Hell yeah. Hey, you're back.
Yeah, I just arrived.
Man, I'm so glad. Yes, yeah, the shrine, yes. I was lonely, you know? Oh, have you seen my main squeeze?
You're, which one?
Your Anapolicule. Hey, Muta. I can't remember which one this is. It's coming. Oh, yeah. Oh, heck yes. Oh my gosh, good. That's really cute. You find her?
Main squeeze Seguro. Nah, not here.
I'm at the, not Seguro one, yeah.
No, I haven't seen her.
Huh. Hey, Wadanohara. Glad to have you back. I'm doing a terrible voice for Seguro. Seguro is like, I picture Seguro as like a gangster kind of voice, but like he's a cool dude. But like that's like a Yakuza voice. That's what I picture, but I'm not sure I can like do that.
Yeah.
Just where'd you go? I know, right? Just
Which one? There are two.
it's been like pretty extreme lately. Dangerous to act alone. Ugh, that buffoon. We gotta find her soon. Yeah. I don't know how to. I know we just met, but help us find her. And Muta is like Bill and Ted.
Right.
I don't know why she's saying that, but it translation thing. She's gonna help. Or maybe not. Okay. Just kidding. Not helping you. Bye.
Right. That's why I came back, isn't it? Hope I can do something.
All right, we are looking for doors with red lines on them. Wait, what's this say? Heck, dude. We're going up, because I remember who lives up here, and we're going to go in here. I think it's here. No, it's not here. And multiple doors. The door to what? The door to what? I see, you're kind of getting, I think our signal's cutting out. Oh, I can't go in there yet. Okay, fine. I have to go over here. Hi. This one was Butters.
Definitely this way. No, it's not. Whichever. What are you doing, guys? Huh? Wow, Wadanohara! You came back! Hey, it's Wadanohara. Oh. Ah. Welcome back. Long time no see. Hisashiburi. Hey, listen, Wadanohara. We were hunting for treasure, you see, and it's definitely this way, right? No, not this way. That way. Huh? Who cares? Huh? Has to be this way. I saw something sparkling. Not just your imagination. I didn't see it. Besides, your intuition is never accurate, is it? It's two. Is not. Is two or is not. Yeah, it's not. Huh? It's two! It's totally two! You don't fight? You're, treasure hunting? Yeah. The sea is a world of treasure. Gotta be good things to find. And thanks to you, we'll never find any of it.
They're the worst.
Not my fault. Your fault. Your fault. Your fault.
There's water, bottom of the ocean.
Only bunch, huh?
Anyway, I'm gonna go up here and talk to the best character in the game. Two of them, if they're both here. Hopefully. Yeah! They're both here! The best. The best! True, true. I'm just so worried. It's fine. No matter what, Lobco's our daughter, right? I suppose. No, certainly. Oh, you get the pluses!
It's been a while. Hi, Carrie Blood, Nilos.
Oh. Mom, Wadanohara, you've returned.
Yes, ma'am.
Long trip, huh? How was it over there?
How do I say it? It was, a new experience.
I'll bet. Wonderful, the world above.
I know I've never left the sea.
Hey, honey, it's not like Wadanohara was playing around.
Oh, I suppose so. And our daughter's doing her best out there, too. Speaking of which, I met Lobco on the way here.
Oh, is that true? Also, Ska.
Is my daughter doing all right? Yes, she seemed to be greatly enjoying herself.
See, just like I told you.
Oh, thank goodness, I was so worried. Maybe stretching the truth a bit, but I think she'd want that.
And how about you? Anything on the way back to the Sea Kingdom? What? Oh. Well, you know that's what it was.
Well, nothing in particular.
I see, I see. Good. They've been acting up. Where are they coming in? They've been intruding all over the kingdom. I know, it's so dangerous. It's really worrying.
Yes, I've heard a little bit about it already. It's a severe situation, is it?
Yeah. Severe, maybe. Especially since they don't seem to want to lend an ear.
So it seems.
Despite those long ears they have. Rude. Uneasy, Wadanohara?
Yes.
It's fine. Don't think too deep about it. A few invasions here and there, but we have defenses.
But...
And you're here to fix the gaps in them, right? It's fine. Have some confidence.
Right. You're the best witch RC has.
Oh. It's not pressure at all.
Thank you very much. I'll do my best.
You sure will.
When things settle down, I want to take a vacation.
And go to the surface?
Yes, I'd love to. That sounds difficult.
I love that she's so big. I love it. The best. Look, don't worry about it. No, I don't think so. I mean, she's the only human, I think. They are.
Oh, glad everyone's doing well. I'd heard it was pretty bad, so I was worried. But everyone looks fine to me. Thank goodness. Now for the castle.
I was loud! Jesus Christ!
Oh, what was that sound? That way.
Thank you for pointing your adorable little sprite. To the right. We'll go this way. What fucking blew up? Hey. What the fuck? Was it out here? Did you fucking blow up out here? Ah, it's fine. Everything's fine. Music's back. It's fine. Hi, everybody. Maybe it's not fine.
Guys! Ah! What a sighting! Wadanohara. There was,
some kind of Sorry. A straight face. Thank you, kid. Some kind of sound.
Let's check it out.
Heck, dude. Oh, Lord. Thank you, Jellyfish, for parting so that I can go this direction. Oh, wait, yeah. You can find the starfish that are just fucking sitting there. They're just fucking sitting there. Why would you do this? Why? Oh, shit. They're actually kind of beef. They're actually pretty beef. Shit. Sorry, I was hydrating during the battle. I realized I didn't do any of my voice stretching or like warm up and so no! Starfish, no! You're not about. No! I just wanted to talk! Look how cute they are. No, I'm so sorry. No, I feel terrible. I love those little dudes. Yeah, I love them. I think that's what the one of the worsts is. The ones that were looking for treasure. I'm pretty sure that's what she is. I'm so sorry for hitting you. I just wanted to talk to you. I didn't realize you were an enemy. So sorry. No, I don't want to hurt you. Oh, okay. Wadanohara is just like instincts.
I'm a white urchin. I sell items.
Oh, wait. No, this is probably the same as, I think this was probably Mega too. I'm a white urchin. I sell items. Welcome, Orlippy. I don't need any of these, actually. Oh, but now I can afford the weapons. I didn't do it. The Sea Witch returns and beats up on all the citizens. I do actually need some money, though. I'm sorry. I can just, there, we'll do that.
Oh.
Fukami, was that necessary?
Yay, we leveled up.
And give him the pot! That sounds like a different thing, actually. That doesn't sound like an attack. That sounds like a favor. Hey! No, it's fine. It's fine. That's it's fine. Jesus Christ. What the fuck happened here? What the fuck have you done? Oh? Wadanohara, bad news! Oh, please calm down.
Kill them all.
Something certainly went down here.
This is scary. Aw, is she going berserk again?
Never. The ones who disturb our sea's moral fiber. All of them will die! Hey, Helica, calm down. Shut up! I'll stab you! Ah, she's lost it from rage, dude! Oh no! Oh, we have to stop her! Yeah, she's got a drill, and she has to. Ah! What? Ragtime now! It's so cute, though.
Let's see.
Boom. Why do you sound like a lion?
No, not Dolphy!
Dolphy is a glass cannon! She's so small and has no health. Ding ding. Ding dong. Thank you. Dolphy's fine now. Grr. I love the idea that Dolphy is snarling. So cute. You hit Dolphy again, you monster!
Peck, peck, peck. Oh, her little
Face.
yay!
Oh god.
Oh, Olga, please calm down. Huh? What in the?
Elika, my main squeeze, you're back with us.
Hmm? What's this about? I do it again.
You sure did. Told you not to go alone. Dude, I was so worried.
Sorry. Just saw them in. Dang, dude. Olga. Oh, Wadanohara, you're back. Yes, are you okay? No problems here. There were lots of them, but that's all they've got. That habit. The blood rushes to my head whenever vile criminals appear. She's so scary. Sorry, Wadanohara. It's a good thing you're here. Now, we can hold back Totoza Kingdom's invasion.
Yeah, they do. Go King, give us nothing.
I don't want more conflict.
Sup? Wait, you're like literally outside the room. He's in the star part of the. He's in the Sea of Stars, bro.
Turn the page. There we go. Well, I was gonna call it at 2 hours, and since we got a little page turn, now we can. That seems like a good place to stop. Hey.
It might have me in a like a cutscene kind of deal or something. In dialogue. Okay.
One sec. Didn't get much sleep. No, just look at me. I've got to be positive. At any rate, I need to do the best I can at what I can. Yes, for the sake of our sea.
There we go.
There we go. Okay. I will call there, everybody. And thank you very much for joining for the first night of Wadanohara. We will be back tomorrow.
Yay! Thanks. We will be back tomorrow evening. Unfortunately, I get off work really late, so I will be back. We will be at 11 p.m. Eastern time, which is, I can do math, 8 Pacific? Yeah. So some thereabouts, is when I get off work, so. What? Heartwarming message? The bean toast?
Yes, bean toast. Consider. Think about it, won't you?
But yeah, so tomorrow at 11 p.m. Eastern, and if you want to, oh man, I should have links to my stuff. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I will have, you know, posts of when I'm going live and all that kind of stuff, and I'll annoy the crap out of you. My links are down below. It says tweets, and then there's another one for my YouTube, which I'll be uploading all the VODs, to YouTube most likely. So, but yeah. I'm gonna go to our ending screen.
And thank you very much for everybody joining in on the first night of Wadanohara. I'm really glad to start this game with you guys. Yay, thank you. I'm so excited. And thank you, Neru, for joining in and following. I hope you enjoy your stay. And I will see you guys next time. Yay. Bye-bye. Bye, everybody. Bye-bye. I'm waving. You can't see it, but I'm waving. I promise. Bye. Bye-bye. Oh, let's figure out how to raid. Wait, duh. Hang on. Who are we gonna raid? I need to remember to raid things. Ariski is doing a raid train. They're doing a charity thing. So we will most likely be raiding Ariski. I don't have a raid call. Wait. Okay, hang on. Let's figure out a raid call first. Oh, to see. Yeah. They're doing a charity. Ariski is streaming alongside Madame Vanessa. And I don't. They might have shoutouts for them, but anyway. So we will go to them, and I have no idea what to do for a raid call. All I can think about is bean toes. I'm stuck on bean toes now. I don't know. I haven't come up with a raid message. I'll have to do that at some point. I think we'll probably just sneak in, most likely. I can't think of anything. I don't know. Alrighty. Yeah, we will raid Ariski because I think that's the only person who's not like way bigger than me. Oh, there's Kiku's on. I don't know. Look at Ariski because they're doing the a charity thing right now. So, Ariski and Madame Vanessa are doing a charity thing. Or what if just like what if it's just literally just like bop 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 bop. Okay, fine, it's poppin' time. God damn it. I'm gonna come up with a better one later, but it'll be that now. It's poppin' time. You can copy and paste poppin'. No, I think Butters is just copying you because it was good. I think we'll just yeah, in support. Hopefully at some point I will have like emotes of like the little bobcat noise, like face, like the face that my avatar makes, and we'll just like bah at them. But let's see, do we have any good cat emojis? Oh wait, how do you do the hang on, what was it? It's like I forgot. There's a shortcut to type emojis manually in Windows, but I forgot what it is. I'm gonna grab a cat emoji from the internet's and a person. No. Okay, there. We're gonna copy